Hello everyone. I hope you're having a great time at Fyne Conference 2023 so far. My name is Renaldi, and today I'll be talking about Conversational UI with Fyne, which is essentially a talk about how you can craft a ChatGPT powered app for multi-platform engagement. My name is Renaldi, and let's get into it. So, just a bit about myself first. I am currently a software engineer at Seek Limited. I am currently 13 times AWS certified, 2 times Microsoft Azure's Expert certified, and also 7 times Google Cloud certified. My personal field of interest is within artificial intelligence, as you can tell, pretty much from my presentation as well. But I also love a lot of cloud-based developments, and we'll see a bit of that as well within presentation too, and also within project management as well. And on the side, I also run meetups, hackathons, do tech talks, and I'm a VR tech enthusiast. So let's run through the agenda for a bit. To start off with, I'll introduce you to FyneChat, talk a bit about why we want to FyneChat, talk a bit about why we want, in general, what is conversational UI, what is the future of that, and afterwards, we're going to be talking about planning for functionality and how we will eventually integrate Fyne into what we're currently doing. Next, we then will look into how we can integrate the cloud and ChatGPT together to be able to work well with Fyne. Fourth, we'll then talk about how we can code this all up, and I'll show you snippets of code essentially of how it all works so that you get an idea more or less of how it all falls into place. And finally, we'll then talk about the future of conversational UI for Fyne. So, as an introduction, I'm pretty sure that no one here is a stranger to the term generative AI anymore, because no matter where you go, you'll hear it here and there. You hear terms ChatGPT, Google Bard, and now you've even heard about maybe Amazon Bedrock too, because recently Amazon came into the fray, releasing their own version of generative AI for general public. So it's no stranger to anyone, I'd say. And conversational UI certainly takes up a big stage in that, because it's all about how you can interact with interfaces and also how AI can, in general, enhance that. And within the project we will see today, we will see this in action, and we will see how this creates as well a paradigm shift within the digital realm, how it's able to change the mindsets of many people of like what we think conversational UI should be, and how we see this moving forward, of course. And aside from that, this all helps us to, in general, be able to foster more natural and intuitive interactions. So, what is the impact on the application landscape at the moment? We currently see that there is a big revolution in user experience, because the way users are interacting with our applications are definitely changing. It's no longer the standard chatbot with predefined responses or the standard UI templates essentially. Now we have ChatGPT, we have Bard. These generative AI help us to tailor our experiences and talk as if they are other people as well that are talking to us too, like a customer representative. So it is actually amazing see how it's actually impacting the applications that we currently have today. It really does create that human interaction, as I mentioned before, and it definitely creates a broader transformation for the application landscape as well. It's really branching out to many different industries and many different applications. So, what is FyneChat? Let me introduce that to you. FyneChat is essentially a fusion of AI, in this particular case ChatGPT, and the Fyne toolkit. And what this means is that it is the birth of an innovative open source project which utilizes Go for development, but essentially takes the best parts of Fyne and relevant toolkits as well that Fyne offers, so that it's able to make the UI more interactive, provide a better user experience, and in general, just enhance the normal Go experience that you would have otherwise. So when I first started planning for functionality, I thought, what would I want a conversational UI to have? And keep in mind, we want to design for an MVP that is more or less able to cater towards many use cases. We want it to be able to be tailored towards different users. We want it to be able to help people more or less in solving many of their problems while also keeping track of the conversations as well. So, of course, starting off with that is a normal basic AI chatbot. But then I thought, what if we can essentially put into place sentiment analysis as well? And more or less try to analyze how the user is feeling and tailor responses accordingly too. So that's particularly where I then decided to connect to one of AWS services, which is AWS Comprehend, and we're going to be talking about that a bit. But essentially, I want to be able to have sentiment analysis done based on the user's responses, and of course, provide as well a topic suggester as well. It also is powered by AWS Comprehend, but what I want is essentially to be able to capture what the user is currently interacting with the AI about. So it captures the biggest trends, it suggests current topics based on that. And we'll see this in action as well when I get to the demo too. So how does Fyne and FyneX integrate into this? Well, firstly, we built the foundation with Fyne. Essentially, we create the elements, including the window that is basically based on Fyne for our conversational UI, and also make use of other components as well. And we'll get into that later too. Some of the other developments we've done with Fyne as well with this project is essentially within creating the layout and the theme too. I tried to emulate a more modernistic design, and this was pretty much accomplished based on Fyne. And I also was able to more or less make the UI more scalable as well because of Fyne too. So what Fyne really managed to do is really help to make the development of this particular app more scalable in terms of how it's able to be responsive in terms of different window sizes, for example, and that's exactly what we want. We want the user to be able to have a great experience no matter what kind of window they currently have. And here, more or less, is just a mention of the kind of components that I used. I also attached definitions to them as well, and more or less, it's pretty much, yeah, if you're used to developing a Fyne already, these probably aren't really a stranger to you. These are pretty standard ones. So yeah, pretty much just like using like app window, creating windows, like pretty much like setting new sizes with new size, text align leading, text style, text wrap word to pretty much, yeah, set the word wrapping for label text within the AI generate content. And also, well, of course, when it's displayed, and also the canvas as well, which, yeah, pretty much gets the size of the window too. And we also make use of containers too. So more or less in this case scenario, for example, new V scroll, which, yeah, essentially helps to create a vertically scrollable container around the chat label. And aside from that, using new HBox, which helps to create a horizontally aligned box container to hold the buttons, which helps in making them look good, essentially, when we look at it in terms of the UI. And aside from that, we also use new border as well, which creates a new border container to hold the input field of the chat itself and the buttons related to what we're going to perform later in the demo as well. And also new grid with rows, which essentially creates a new grid container with specified rows to, yeah, arrange the chat container as well and the input buttons container. We also made use of some widgets as well, which includes new entry, new label with style, and new button with icon. I won't get too deep into this, but essentially it's just a showcase of how Fyne is being integrated into this including with the creation of new button widgets. And yeah, particularly essentially just being able to create new labels based on it too, with the new label with style widget that's being used. So the integration with the cloud is actually a very simple integration, nothing too complicated for this one. What we do is we're just basically calling the AWS Comprehend API. So we're just basically making a call to the API, and it sends the response based on the classification that it has made for the sentiment that it has been sent through based on the text. And essentially, for this particular case, and for this particular demo, I'm just going to be showing kind of like a demo between them two, and comprehend just classifying between 3 different possible states, which is positive, neutral, and negative. So based on the text, it classifies based on this, and it then passes it on to ChatGPT to be able to then process it and accordingly adapt its responses well too. So we're not only making a normal generative AI response, we're making one that is contextually driven based on the user's mood as well, which really helps to better prepare the user to be able to interact with it. So now let's get into a bit of the code. So to start off with first, we want to be able to create the window of the application. And as you can see here, it's quite a chunk, but when you actually look at it quite closely, it's actually not too deep. If you're used to developing with Fyne, a lot of this will be quite familiar to you. So to start off with, we firstly essentially more or less just like declare a window. We more or less, like having a new window. We more or less use a new entry as well, particularly, and set a placeholder too, so that we can essentially start putting a input box for us to start typing messages to. We want to be able to create buttons as well. That's why we have the send button, for example. We use widgets for that. Essentially, we create two different buttons in this case scenario. We create a send button, which helps to send the message, and a suggest topics button, which more or less helps to return the suggested topics that are currently being already kept tracked by AWS Comprehend, essentially, when we actually request them for topic suggestions based on our conversation so far. And pretty much aside from that, it's just implementation of containers to be able to hold them, while also making sure that the content is being displayed well too. We then want to create a sentiment analysis function. So in this particular case scenario, we're more or less just creating a new AWS session. As you can see over here, we are pretty much just declaring the region, just declaring a new AWS Comprehend session, and detecting the sentiment input as well as part of this too. So we're preparing the request object, then we make the API request based on the text that's currently already formatted accordingly based on this, and we just send it through, and after that it more or less just sends back the sentiment to us. It's a similar logic with topic suggestion as well, but we're sending through these kinds of things with a different goal. In topic suggestion, we want to be able to detect the key phrases within our input. So we're trying to find commonalities within our current text. And with this, we're using detect key phrases input, particularly from Comprehend, and more or less just making another API request as well to be able to detect the key phrases as appropriate. And yeah, more or less just returning it back to us so that when we actually do request for topic suggestions based on what our conversations have been so far, it'll be returned to us. Now comes the fun part. We code up the send message function, and this is the big one because we more or less try to create the the function to be able to send messages essentially. So in this particular case scenario, I'm not showing everything of it because yeah, a lot of it is pretty self-explanatory, but I'm showing the important parts of it so that you get the gist more or less. And what we do here is we firstly want to construct the messages and prepare the request body for doing the API call. And afterwards, we then we want to include a system message, which serves as a prompt for the AI, which basically in this case scenario, in this demo, we're showing that how it can behave, for example, as a helpful travel advisor that is able to help us provide tips and tricks for travel usage. And you are essentially the user here, and that's why your messages are being displayed under user. And we are passing through the request body with the GPT 3.5 turbo model. And of course you can, use like different models as well, like for example GPT-4, which definitely will get you more accurate responses, I'd say. But in this case scenario, we're using GPT 3.5, and we're passing that through, and we're creating an HTTP request for the OpenAI API. We're passing that through. We're essentially using a post request towards the endpoint, and we set an authorization header, we set a content type header, and we send a request over and accordingly handle the response, with the window then accordingly updating based on our the response that is returned to, so that we are able to see the response directly on the screen. And in reading and parsing the body, we can see how we particularly are doing this based on this particular code. So we're basically just picking the best choice out of what is returned from ChatGPT, and we're just essentially mapping it accordingly and updating the chat UI as well with the response, so that we're able to see it in action when we actually do look at it from the interface itself. And now we'll get into the demo. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to be showing a short demo of more or less how this all will look like when you put it into practice. And here we have our FyneChat window. So as you can see, more or less, this is a UI that is designed based on using Fyne, and it's, as you can see, it's pretty basic. It's not too decorative yet or too modernistic yet, but regardless, it still shows the capacity of what Fyne more or less is able to do in terms of making conversational UI. So what we want to do here is essentially we just want to give it a shot and see more or less how it pans out. So for example, I can say like, hello there, like, and we'll see pretty much like what that gives out. And it's able pretty much like from, as you can see, it's able to classify directly from my exclamation mark that is like a positive kind of vibe. So yeah, pretty much it's able to more or less also like respond accordingly to like in a positive way too. Then maybe like let's try a less upbeat way now of like, for example, say like, tell me about yourself. Now we send that, and then it's able to classify someone as neutral. So it's more or less able to also tailor response based on that too. So for example, let's say like, I am looking to go to Rome, and pretty much, yeah, it's going to accordingly, yeah, as it should, like, yeah, talk about like Rome is a beautiful city with a rich history. So it's able to more or less do that. And now let's say, for example, if we want to actually have our common topics more or less like actually suggested to us. So for example, in this case scenario, we don't yet have any common topics. But if, for example, if we say we want like, so what are great recommendations to do there? Great Definitions of things to do there. I love hiking. And pretty much we're able to put that. It's positive sentiment. And yeah, pretty good. Recommend something, then we can actually have it recommend some stuff to us, and it's actually able to capture the common stuff now. So that's just a demo of more or less like what it's able to do. So what does the future of conversational UI look for Fyne? Essentially, the future is really bright in terms of conversational UI. We have the potential to be able to create powerful conversational UI with this, and this is just the beginning. Right now, we're already seeing a lot of projects that are able to leverage generative AI for many purposes, but there is the huge potential for Fyne because one of the biggest topic areas right now is adaptive UI, which basically is all about the potential for AI to help generate an adaptive UI for you. So, for example, say if you prefer a particular style of how your UI wants to be, your AI can essentially generate that particular style specifically for you based on that. So that is a very big thing, and that'll definitely help cater towards many users based on their own preferences. And aside from that, I feel like I would like to also cast a vision as well for future innovations. That is one of them. And another is more or less how the Fyne community goes on ahead from here too. Because I believe there's a lot of things that we have to be able to gain from this, to be able to more or less innovate for. And that's why I feel engaging the community as well for collaborative development within this area is very important. We've seen this development in many areas, but not so much on the Fyne area yet. So I would like to personally just put this as an invitation for more development from the community, Fyne community, to see more use cases, explore more different ways of how you can implement generative AI into your projects, and more or less strive towards the vision of adaptive UI and maybe even more, maybe even greater things. Like, it's definitely a big thing, and it's going to continue being a big thing. So, what are the key takeaways from this talk? Well, firstly, it's all about the conversational UI paradigm. It's all about seeing how far we've progressed and how it has changed how we interact with UI in general, and how it has the potential to adapt towards our own use cases. I'd say that there is a huge area still left to be explored from this, and the Fyne community has a lot of tools, a lot of potential for being able to help pioneer that future. Because with the current tools and components that Fyne has, we have a lot of work to do in terms of being able to make that adaptive. And we have a lot of potential as well in being able to do that, because we already have the tools to do that within Fyne. So that creates a lot of potential within that. And of course, because of that, we have a lot of great possibilities to be able to create powerful conversational interfaces that we can work with and that we can continue utilizing for various purposes. And of course, as part of this as well, it's very important to create a continuous culture of engagement and learning, because at the end of the day, that's how we're going to create a great impact for the community, and to be able to really grow the community impact in terms of how we are choosing to innovate for generative AI and the innovations that we see from here too. So that is all for my talk. I'm happy to connect with anyone over my socials. I have my Twitter there, LinkedIn there, GitHub there as well if you want to see some of my work, or pretty much to see the source code for this too. And feel free to connect me there. I'm happy to take any questions as well after the conference too. And yeah, that's all for me for now. And with that, I'd like to close my talk and hand back to the organizers.